Welcome back to the Wealth Witches podcast. I'm your host, Katelyn Magnuson, and I'm so excited to have you here today with me. We're talking about something that is near and dear to both my heart and so many of those that I work with, especially since most of our clients are neurodivergent, and I'm really excited. So hang in here because I wanted to kick off with something that I feel like, if you're anything like me, has been said many a time in your life, and that is that a jack of all trades is a master of none, implying that someone that, dabbles in many different areas maybe isn't as much of an expert or doesn't have as much knowledge, and it gives the connotation or the underlying feeling that it may not be as good of an option, right? But the full quote, which I didn't actually hear until probably 5 or 6 years ago, is a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And I feel like that might be healing to a few of us to hear. And I know it's just a quote, right? We can all make our own decisions in life, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about being multi-passionate and the myth of being too much. Again, personal experience here. If this is ever anything that you have been told or you found yourself feeling, you're probably in the right place. So I have always been the kind of person who dabbles. I'm a dabbler. I'm a dilly-dallyer sometimes, but I can also have intense periods of hyper focus. And although I was diagnosed with ADHD in high school, it took me a really long time to really figure out what that meant, because especially for women, it was misrepresented, or represented, I should say, very differently. And for me, I know that my parents had absolutely no idea. You can see it in my work history prior to starting the freelance CFO and Wealth Witches, but you can see with that a job history that in hindsight makes complete sense. But at the time when I was hopping from job to job every 6 months to 18 months, I think the longest I lasted somewhere was 4 years, and that was a rarity. And it's because I was challenged. I could be multifaceted. I wasn't in a role where I was only doing one thing. And that's one of the reasons, in my opinion, that I ended up being much more successful as a business owner, because it provides the amount of novelty that I require while still giving me structure. Granted, structure that I have to create or that I have a team that helps me create, but it makes a really big difference. So I want to also we're going to talk about hobbies. We're going to talk about some ventures that I have coming up that I'm really excited about. And that's why this was so top of mind. But like I said, I see it with a lot of my clients. And one of my favorite humans in the world, Chelsea Abril, is a multi-passionate human. Annie, I believe you say her last name, Pecci. We'll link her in here on TikTok. Her entire platform is about being multi-passionate. And I've followed her for a really long time, thoroughly enjoy her content. And she's also, I believe, both of them are neurodivergent creators. And I see a lot of myself reflected in their content. So this episode is going to be for anyone who has ever been told to pick a lane or pick a niche or niche down. So I want to challenge you and talk about why being multi-passionate isn't a flaw, in my opinion, and it can actually be your greatest asset. Now, I gave you a few, background tidbits, but one of the biggest issues where this has come up, I mean, there's a really recent one, but then there's a big one, and actually what led to the rebranding of this podcast. So for any of you that have been listening for a while, this actually used to be called the Confident Money Podcast, because for me, feeling confident about money is one of the most important things and one of the biggest impacts that I want to have. I want you to feel confident to make decisions. I want you to feel confident that you understand what you're doing with your finances, because if you don't, it's a really crummy feeling, and it doesn't let you make empowered choices. And I want you to live a life full of ands, not ors, not ifs, not buts. I want a full life full of ands. What had happened was, years ago, I was raised Catholic, rejected Catholicism in high school. Never felt right for me personally. Doesn't mean it's not right for you. And after that, I ended up feeling really confidently atheist or agnostic at that point in time. And always was interested, even as a little girl. My Nana, when we would they lived not too far from British Columbia, we would go to British Columbia, and I have some early childhood memories of going to what I would call witchy shops. We'd go get high tea, we'd go to the witchy shops, and it was always just a really lovely experience with another, especially older woman or matriarch. And I think that's something that I've been reflecting on a lot subconsciously. That's kind of coming to the surface right now, because as I got into my 20s and I started, there's a little bit of astrology, or there's a little bit of human design, or there's a little bit of Enneagram, and we love to make sense of our world. As humans, we love to understand ourselves. We love to give reason. We love to assign things to it. And for me, the overlap of spirituality and science just kept coming together and coming together and coming together. And that can look like woo, and that can look like energetics, and that can look like manifesting, and that can look like rituals and magic and, putting intentions out there and working with crystals and moon water. And I started feeling a little anxious, nervous, all of the above, right? Because like, how is this going to be perceived? I have clients that are religious. Are they going to care? Because I'm all for you doing exactly what works for you, so long as it's not harming others, right? And so for me, this just kept coming up and kept coming up, and I was siloing myself, right? Especially working in the accounting field, I felt like I had to present in a certain way. I had to present as, this expert who has all the answers, who knows all the things, who's very left brained versus the right brain creative side. And actually, the very, very first iteration of the freelance CFO was called left brain results, because in my mind, I'm the analytical left brain side. However, the older I get, the more that I unmask the ADHD and the autism. For me, I am significantly more creative than I ever allowed myself to be. I grew up, I embroidered, I sewed, I crocheted, I knitted, I did clay crafts, I did jewelry making, like you name it. And I've done so many things as a kid. I'm also a voracious reader. I won, this is a running joke in our friend group, I won multiple summer library competitions up until I started working a job the summer that I turned 15. But prior to that, I would walk to the library once or twice a week, get as many books as I could carry home, read them all, and then enter all of them. And I won a lot of prizes. So if you grew up in Newburgh in that time frame and you were entering, I'm so sorry. I basically made it my full-time job. Now, that being said, what started happening is I would show up and I would get this little, I'd want to talk about it. I'd want to ask someone what their rising sign was. I want to, oh, well, that makes sense. Like Mercury's in retrograde right now, or things are just, a little bit of a struggle astrologically. Like, of course, it makes sense that your email went out with, all the placeholders in it and none of the information that you needed. But I wasn't really comfortable merging those two sides of me personally. And if you've listened to the origin story of how Wealth Witches came about, you'll know that I, after some urging, some nudges, just decided to go with it. And I have had, not that this matters, right? But for those of you that are nervous about it or making the leap, I have had so much positive feedback. Clients will find out that I do that and they're like, oh, wow, like that's something that I'm interested in too. Like you're not just an accounting firm, you're not just a founder, you have all this other knowledge and background. And so I very, very early on in my business had niched into apparel industry. And then I realized that wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. And the further I've gone along, the more in my one business, in the accounting side of things, I have what I kind of call mini niches, many niches. We work with wedding industry businesses. We work with service providers. We work with digital marketing agencies. Like there are these clumps that have similarities with them. So I'm not, working with pizza restaurants and, photographers, because those inherently don't have a lot of the same overlap, but it allowed me to help people that have really similar shared needs. And so I also, for the longest time, and this does go into like Pareto's principle, right? The 80-20 rule, like 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. So it's something that we've talked about before, where I go through and I review service offerings and pricing and, how many of something get booked in a given year? Is it even worth offering something? And sometimes it's not, we'll go through and clean things out. I do the same thing. So services, offerings, my own home stuff, and this is going to get a little rambly here for just a second, but I want you to understand that all of this plays together at the end of the day. So I'm not focused on niching down. I'm focused on showing my multi-passionate background, because we're multifaceted human beings. And so for those of you that may not know, my educational background is not in accounting. I went to a community college in Oregon, and then I went to a state school in Oregon, and I had an absolutely wonderful experience. And I had debated doing the School of Business, as well as I was majoring in international development studies with a focus on Latin America and sustainable agriculture. And I wanted to be a diplomat or involved in international government at some point when I was older. I had looked at Georgetown. I'd been like, there'd been options that I'd looked at, and it just, frankly, I didn't want to take on the student loan debt. Although Georgetown, in hindsight, probably would have been a wild adventure. That's, Katelyn in a different lifetime. And so what I want to encourage you to think about is like, I have a really, really passionate background when it comes to sustainable agriculture, permaculture. I lived in the Portland area for years. I went to school for something that I don't do on a daily basis, or I didn't do on a daily basis, people thought. And then as I started talking about this, I found something that I am really good at. I'm really good at teaching. I'm really good at connecting, and numbers and accounting have always come easily for me. And that's what a lot of my work experience was, which is why I decided not to go ahead and do the business school, because it was more expensive. I was on a fixed amount that I could spend in order to get my education. And frankly, a lot of the jobs that I had over the years just needed that bachelor's as something to check a box on, which is a conversation for another day. Now, what ended up happening is it broadened my horizon so much to see how everything was interconnected. I look at things, that really supported my viewpoint of looking at things in the world holistically and a little cynically at times. There were some really great classes that I took that I credit with a lot of my development as a human being and continued thinking. And so with that, if I were to just be Katelyn, the accounting firm founder, that's totally fine. It is not reflective of who I am. It's not reflective of the fact that I have 25 chickens and I have 3 rescue pit bulls and I have 3 cats and I have a bunch of cardboard out in my orchard right now because it makes some of the best base for compost and worm and soil health. I have an orchard and a garden, and I have a farm LLC that people basically never know about that I'm working on educational content around. I have a husband who is probably one of the most get shit done people I've ever met in my life. And so stay tuned, because we have some really exciting things that I think will be coming in the very near future on that front, because we're both multi-passionate. We're both doing things all the time. My business, the Freelance CFO, is not solely who I am. It is one facet of who I am. And I watched this happen with someone that I will hopefully have as a guest on in the next month or two. And so I'm not going to give you too many details, but she's amazing. I'm surrounded by really, really amazing women in my life, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But for me, it is really interesting to see how she has pivoted so many times in her life so far. And she's made one pivot was very related and very successful. And this next pivot, I had a hand in kicking off. I'm not going to lie. And it's woo and it's astrology. And it's so cool to see her dive headfirst into this new aspect of herself, this new, income generation, this new venture. And it's not, she has several other ventures going on. Like she is multi-passionate to the extreme, and I love it. And Chelsea, who I talked about, and she doesn't know that I'm talking about her here, so I'll have to let her know after I finish recording this, but Chelsea is a certified yoga instructor. She's an amazing photographer. She's a business coach. She's an incredible human being, but she has so many different interests in her life and passions in her life, and she's really fucking good at all of them. And there are times where she gets to incorporate one or both of those together, right? Like when I did coaching with her, she would bring booty yoga sessions in for new moon, full moon, which was so much fun. Same thing on the photography side. Like she gets to be so hella cool. And that's something that I always think of if I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious about, like, oh, am I doing, what I should be doing here? Is this too much? Is this too much? And I will also say, this is a shameless plug for my husband. He doesn't listen to the podcast, so this is more for you. My first husband was not this way. If you ever think that you are too much, I know that the saying is to tell someone to go find less. My husband and I are both a lot. We are a lot. And there are times that I have our friends over here who I have some amazing humans, and we'll be laughing. I'll sit and I'll realize, and I'm like, holy shit, we're a lot. We're a lot together. Never, ever in our friend group, in my relationship, are we made to feel like we're too much for one another. We get to be neurodivergent and weird and dark and twisty and hilarious. And one of the last times that I had a couple of my best friends here, we were sitting in the hot tub on the deck, which is an inflatable, like, camping hot tub. And we didn't want to get out because it was cold. And we decided that we would go or caca, but not like cute little. I'm not going to repeat it on here because we have a log house and it can be really difficult to hear, especially with music playing. But all of our significant others or brothers or siblings, friend group men were inside, and we were just caca, basically screaming at them like really bad crows. And so now we do that in a crowd when we need to find them. And it's one, it makes us laugh. Two, it's distinctive and unique. But I want to throw that in there so that if you are ever feeling like you're too much. There, you have people out there. Please go find your people. Please go find a partner who might think what you're doing is crazy, but is here for it. I know that I've done things that David's like, what? Do I even want to know? And I'm like, probably not. And vice versa. So I think that the world will only benefit. And this is a lesson and a message for myself. The world will only benefit from you showing up as yourself and you being weird and authentic and dark and funky and silly and just showing up. Showing up. The world needs more weird. The world needs more you. And I know that the cultural myth of having to pick one of the biggest things that I lament to David and to my friends is there are so many things I want to do in my life, and there's so little life in which to do them. And I want you, instead of being sad about it, I use it as encouragement to do things, to see things, to try things. Something that I may talk about, actually, I'll probably talk about in a little bit more depth as I get into it, is I did not grow up snowboarding, skiing. I lived an hour from Mount Hood and 2 hours from Mount Bachelor, I think. And it wasn't something, my dad hates the snow. And we didn't have a ton of money when I was growing up for a while at the age that like would have been normal to go learn. And then you get into your teens and your 20s, and I didn't have a lot of money in my early 20s. And now at 35, so David started, he snowboarded once or twice, I think, in his early 20s. And he has been going a couple times a year now for the last few years and has been learning and doing something that he's not great at right off the bat. And I'm going to go take skiing lessons this winter. And I am nervous because I'm 35. Things get a little creaky. I have a tendency to not be the most coordinated, but I have to try. And I have to try because I don't ever want to be the person that gets to a point that's like, oh, I missed the boat on that. I'm too old for that. No, I'm going to go do it. It might look totally different. I'm going to go take lessons. I have friends again who they'll tease me, but they have no issues. They'll support me going, they'll be there with me. And I've watched it happen with David, and it's been a really fun thing to see. And so that for me is something that I'm incorporating interests and things that I've always wanted to do on the personal side. And so I'm looking at how can I do that on the business side? And a lot of that is kind of like this podcast, right? Showing up. We're not inherently talking about money, but everything links back to money if we want it to. Me not being able to ski, money for the longest time. And then it comes to, what are people going to think of me and trying new things. And all of this comes back to, I feel like, society and the patriarchy and feeling like we need to do one thing. And if you don't focus on one thing and become the best at it, then it's not quite a worthwhile pursuit, right? And my opinion is that something worth doing is worth doing half-assed. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't whole-ass it, but something worth doing is worth you doing even to a little extent. So even if I already have the snow clothes and I have a helmet, I'm going to go rent my gear this year. I'm going to go take the lessons. I'm not planning to become a professional skier, but it's something that I really want to be able to do, especially when we travel. I want to be able to go with friends. It's a great winter hobby. I live somewhere where there's a lot of snow, and snowshoeing gets a little boring after a while. And so I want you to be thinking here, this kept popping up in my business life, is I love having the freelance CFO. I love what we do. I love the clients that we work with. They're weirdos and I love them, and it's fantastic. And our team are a bunch of weirdos and it's fantastic. And I mean that in the greatest way. It's not the only thing that I want to do. I've said this to like 2 people. I kind of want to have a flower farm, which feels very white woman, mid-30s millennial of me. But it's something that I've looked at because I have the Farm LLC. I have educational content that I am going to be putting out for that, all about, again, that actually plays back to my college interests and sustainability and permaculture and everything else along those lines. I just have so many interests. I have wealth witches that have popped up, where I'm incorporating the menstrual cycle syncing and I'm incorporating moon cycles into that. And all of those play in together, even with the finances, but also as a standalone. I have some really cool ideas for future content and books and some speaking events that I want to be doing this next year that all help me show up as my full self, not just Katelyn, the accounting firm founder. So I want to encourage you to do all of these things. I want to encourage you to dabble, to dilly-dally, to dip your toe. Just because it's not the thing that you've been doing or it's not the thing that you've been known for, it doesn't mean that you can't go do it, that you can't go try something out. Because what if your blend of passions, your multi-passionate self, is exactly what helps you create your magical life and see it fully expressed? I do want to close out with something that I would recommend is channeling this. One, go check out the creators that I'm going to link, right? I love them. They're wonderful. Don't jump into everything all at once. Take the nudges, go with them. If I'm getting nudged to go work in the garden, maybe we're going to create some content around that. If I'm getting nudged because, wow, like the moon cycles this month have been throwing me for one, which we should probably talk about on another episode at some point, but I had a really, really rough August and September. October, things got significantly better. I'm a Scorpio rising. We love that for me. And then it was like I was on fire, but on fire in the best way. Mars and Mercury were getting going. Like it was all the things. And I'm feeling much better overall now. But it was just go, go, go. And like my ass was on fire, but seriously in the best way. I want to encourage you to listen to your energy, to match your passions with your current life cycles, right? Like we're not looking, if you're doing things right now and maybe something needs to take a back burner for a second. Maybe you need to rotate something else out. Like for me, seasonally, right? There's a lot that I can do in the summer, and then things slow down a little bit in the winter, which means that I have more time for work and I have more time for exploring new hobbies like coloring, embroidering, mending, skiing, snowshoeing, snowmobiling. Like there's things that you can do and get out. Also, you can just take time to be cozy and read, which I do a lot of as well. I want you to understand, I want you to take away from this that you have permission to be complex. You have permission to be multifaceted. You have permission to be a freak and a weirdo. And I mean that with love, to be unique, to be yourself. I want to challenge you that if you've ever felt like you were too much, you've ever had someone tell you that, what would it mean or what would it feel like if nothing about you was ever too much and it was exactly right and exactly who you were supposed to be?
That's a wrap for this episode of the Wealth Witches podcast. I hope our magical money talks have left you feeling empowered and inspired. Remember, wealth isn't just about dollars in the bank, it's about abundance and financial freedom in all aspects of your life. I'm Katelyn Magnuson, encouraging you to keep challenging the status quo and embrace your inner witch on this financial journey. Until next time, stay magical.